My product teams in San Francisco would tell you all that I am a huge fan. I'm in love with bad puns. So when I found out that I was able to come to Amsterdam, I was over the moon. They also are very excited to have me away from them because I've been torturing them with AMP puns for about 3 weeks. So now they're happy to have me here where I can torture you guys with a couple of AMP puns as well as the people who are live streaming at home. We've seen a lot of really cool solutions so far with AMP technologies, everything from publishers to e-commerce giants using AMP in really creative ways, beautiful AMP websites and this marriage between AMP and PWAs, and even just now about how ads themselves are going into AMP. And it's been this nonstop AMP party for the last 2 days, but I feel like we forgot a really important guest to the AMP party, and that is the advertisers and marketers who themselves are responsible for taking that post-click journey from once they've earned that click in nurturing and guiding those customers all the way through that post-click journey until they become that closed sale. Because either they get through the checkout cart or they fill out a form submission and get into that further lead nurture space. So that's really where Instapage comes in, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So one of the things that those of you who may not know Instapage and what we do, first of all, we have a really simple mission, but it's a big one, and that's to scale post-click optimization. And we have a vision that every potential customer really should get a personalized post-click experience. So, the way we do that is we're a market leader in this post-click optimization space by really providing the ability and empowering thousands of businesses and marketers to be able to take that click once it's gone through that first stage and really turn up the conversions, crank that up to 11 through a number of functionalities and core key areas. And those really they sit at the nexus between 3 major problems that AMP has its fair amount of trials and tribulations that our engineering team has had to overcome. And first and foremost being the idea of scalable creation of post-click experiences, landing pages and content. We have a robust and powerful drag-and-drop WYSIWYG builder that any designer who's familiar with Sketch or Illustrator will be comfortable with, but also has a usability and accessibility for marketing managers, designers, and content teams to be able to make changes at the speed of marketing. And how do we scale that and package that into something that is validated by AMP when infinite possibilities of design solutions could happen in any customer. Also, we have dynamic content, personalization, how we're normally done through passing parameters. This high up at the funnel, we don't know a lot about the customers. We don't necessarily know exactly all of the channels and things that are coming through and those difficulties. How do we provide that functionality? And last but not least, optimization. Multivariate testing, A/B testing, being able to actually understand where people are interacting on the pages. These are things that our core platform provides, and how do we translate that into an AMP solution is something that has really been our team has been tackling for the last few months. So in January, we launched Instablocks, which does a lot of really cool things, but first and foremost, it's reusable content blocks that advertisers and marketers can take all of the content that they're already using and just recombine that on the fly into any number of unique pages. We're rolling out soon also global blocks, which essentially is create global instances of those being propagated across thousands of live landing pages, so changes can be made once and then propagated instantly and automatically across everything that's already live. And the thing that I'm most excited to really be able to talk about and announce today is that we're baking AMP into all of that functionality. We're building in AMP as part of our core platform. Every landing page that someone makes with Instapage can be made with an AMP version and an AMP validated page to go along with that. So some of the things that we're trying to talk about here is really then with all of those struggles and those trials and those things and the limitations of AMP that we've all talked about when we've been standing up here, is why are we pushing forward to deliver AMP in the first place? And one of those things, so I'll talk a little bit about why we're pushing forward in this space to deliver AMP to all of our customers. This is first and foremost a developer conference, so I want to make sure that I will leave Piyush ample time to be able to get into the details. And I did promise you guys I was going to make some bad puns. So I promise that'll be the last one, though. So first of all, in the fall, Instapage launched a state of mobile conversion report. A simple Google search, and you'll be able to Instapage, state of mobile conversion. You can dig into the details and the sources on some of this data. But we're just going to talk about a couple of those things right now. We looked at 41 million anonymous visitors to 45,000 live landing pages across every industry, across every business of every size. And what we saw is that about 52% of all of the traffic to all of our landing pages was coming to and from mobile pages. Even more interestingly, if you drill down on that and you take a look at, say, everyone who had at least one visit to a mobile page, so they're actually in production and they're driving a lot of traffic to those, that number raises to about 60% of all traffic going to mobile across our platform. There's also, this really interesting fact that 46% of all of the pages on our platform are getting more than half of their traffic to mobile. So this isn't really like a big surprise, I think, to anyone in this room that mobile's a big thing and a lot of traffic's going there. But one of the things that was really interesting to us when we were doing this dive into our data is that more than half of our business is not in the United States. And those conversion rates particularly get interesting when we look at a couple of regions, such as Latin America and some areas of Asia Pacific, where we might expect ordinarily a landing page experience would be slowed down by either bandwidth limitations or the pages themselves would have some load speed, and those conversions would be really low. But we're seeing about 20% conversion with a status quo page option. And I think we're all here because we all think that the status quo page and load speed sucks. So one of the things that's really interesting, telling a compelling story for us, is that highly relevant targeted landing pages and post-click experiences are overcoming a lot of problems with conversions, and they still suck, right? They're still really slow. They still are not even as the best that they could possibly be. And an increasingly global customer base that's increasingly moving to mobile, where we're in a space where 60% of ad spend is going to mobile. Most of the world is consuming all of their content in mobile. And in the advertising and marketing space is actually like lagging behind their ability to deliver really, really tailored, relevant mobile experiences in a way that can capitalize on that opportunity. Because speed really matters. Every extra second that the page loads, you're going to lose people. It doesn't take that long before people just check out mentally. And once they're gone, they're not coming back. And there's a really damn good chance that even when they're not coming back, it's because they're going to a competitor whose page did load faster once it loads. But we have some unique challenges in our areas, because speed matters, but speed matters to the advertiser only insofar that it facilitates conversion. So stripping out all of the elements that allow them to achieve conversions, where they're already getting pretty good rates at about the 20% range average, stripping out all those converting elements for the sake of speed doesn't really help us out. So we need to really balance that benefit of what we can do with AMP and what we can do to provide high converting pages. There's also this really unique area in advertisers with volume, velocity, and relevancy. So it's not to say that any other use case doesn't have a lot of volume and a lot of velocity, but the thing that's unique in the advertising space is that the uniqueness of that. So it's not just enough to have a lot of pages in front of all of your ad sets, all of your audiences. You really need to get really specific and narrow into targeting audiences, having unique messaging, and it's the volume and velocity of the uniqueness of those page and post-click experiences, which is an extra challenge to overcome, and it creates a lot of page production and a lot of testing. Analytics as well. It's not just enough to say, okay, here's how many people who came to the page, here's how long they spent, and whether they converted or not. These advertisers and marketers really need to know what element on the page drove the conversion. What part of my messaging is resonating with a specific audience, and what part's not resonating with a different audience, and be able to make those decisions. So how do we overcome that challenge? As well as personalization and optimization. A lot of these things are done through parameters. Keeping that consistency of messaging all the way through the customer journey is really highly important to marketers. That trust all the way up from the first click on Google through the post-click experience into the cart needs to be maintained and relevant and personalized all the way through. So these are some of the things that we have to really keep in mind. But at the end of the day, speed still really matters. We dug in and looked a little bit deeper. If you start to take a look at just some of the performance on individual pages, a really interesting thing is, no images on a page still has a pretty good conversion rate, but it's not the best that you can actually achieve. There's not that visually engaging, relevant experience when you move through post-click. You start to get into one image, we're topping out at performance there, we suspect largely due to page load speed. 2 to 3 images still does really well, but you start to get to more than 4 images, and the heavier the page gets, the lower and lower the conversion rate goes. Well, marketers need a lot of tools to be able to tell their story. They need a lot of different forms of post-click pages, post-click experiences, and it's not really good enough to say, hey, that long form page that really sells the benefits and tells someone why they should spend a lot of money with you and trust you. You can't deliver that because you're not getting maximum conversion rates. But first and foremost, at Instapage, we're and people, not or people. So we sat down and we tried to figure out a way, like how can we give people fast AMP pages and highly specific, relevant content that allows them to maximize their conversions and take that from a 20% rate with some of the numbers we saw yesterday, maybe even like boosting that conversion rate by an additional, say, up to 30% with AMP speeds and give everyone the best of both worlds. So I'll be handing it over shortly to Piotr Stelashowski, who is our Senior Director of Engineering in Warsaw and our VP of Instapage Poland, to talk about how we're trying to productize AMP at scale, be able to deliver these robust analytics with heat maps, how we're going to make forms something that actually helps conversions. 50% of conversion goals for our customers are lead gen and form submissions. Like, how can we maintain that effectiveness? How we allow people to make an infinite array of designs with an infinite amount of stylings. We have 15,000 potential brand guidelines to maintain and allow people to package that all into AMP and proper stylings, and how we're going to maintain A/B testing and provide that functionality for our platform. So please allow me to bring on Piotr and give him a really warm welcome.
Thanks. OK, hi guys. So this is simply a list of problems we have with implementation. So the main problem is caused by our powerful builder, which is very, very flexible. And for example, one user can have only 3 widgets without any custom styling. And another one can have, for example, 100 widgets, and each of them can have a custom styling. So because of that, we can't predict what will be exactly on HTML. So we need to be prepared for every possibility. So the other problem is related with our custom features, because, for example, analytics and heat maps, it's our own made by us features. So there is a little problem with implementation them into AMP. OK, so our analytics tracks a lot of data, but mostly it tracks visitors and conversions. And everything is fine with this, but we like JavaScript, so we have a lot of business logic on the front-end side. And we are using cookies for detecting that visitor is unique. So on the left side, you have a diagram with our current approach. On the right side is solution for AMP. So we are starting with checking if a user already has a cookie. And if not, we are setting this cookie. And then we use tracking pixel to send this data to MongoDB. With AMP's situation, it's very different, because we can't identify unique visitors on the front end. So we have only client ID. It's the only cookie which AMP allows for using, and we need to move entire business logic to the backend. And so we have this client ID, so we can send this value to backend by using AMP analytics component, which generates AMP pixel. And we are storing this data directly to MongoDB. And why? We decided to set a unique key index as AMP client ID in Mongo. So when we are trying to store the same data, the same key again in Mongo, so database returns a duplicate error, and we know that this record already exists in the database, and we can make another action. It will be, for example, a simple query to the database with update this parameter to visited to true, or do nothing if we do not want to track not unique visits. Okay, another system which we are using is our own heat maps. Heat maps allows for tracking 3 events. It's mouse movement, clicks, and scroll depth. And I will talk about them separately because they have different limitations. Okay, we will start with AMP scroll event. It's very easy to do this in AMP because AMP Analytics has a trigger which can be used and configured properly. Will be a best solution for this. So on the slide you can see the example, which is quite simple. Okay, another event is AMP tap event. This is a little trouble for us because, like you can see on the slide, user often clicks not on particle elements, but also on the space outside the elements. Also, users clicks on particle words in the sentence, not entire sentence itself. So there is a problem with this AMP tap event because it's tracking this event for entire element. So, for example, you can't track this space outside elements because it's not an element. For making this works with these particle words, for example, we can see that most clicked words are conversions and Instapage. So for knowing that, we can separate these words with some additional HTML tags. And then we don't have one element for entire sentence, but a lot of different elements, and we can track them separately. Okay, mouse movement. Obviously, we don't use mouse movement on the mobile device because we don't have mouse. But I would like to only mention about this because Google is working on accelerated pages, which are simply AMP for desktop pages. And this event would be very, very, very useful for us. So this is a little suggestion. Okay, Material UI and for validation. We very like the Material UI from Google. We are using this Material UI on entire dashboard and builder. And what we like with this solution is the UX, especially on forms. I don't know if you are familiar with these behaviors, but the error is not showed until the input value is changed. And this is very important. And right after input is changed, the error should be shown. So this behavior is mostly produced by using JavaScript. Of course, AMP doesn't allow for using JavaScript, but there is a very good solution for this problem. You need to use input change event in the form. It's fired right after the input value is changed. So, and you can also mix this event with on attribute and execute an action, different action for different elements right after this input is changed. So it's a very good solution for having Material UI forms on our landing pages. Okay, like you know, AMP has a CSS size limitation, which is 50 kilobytes. And there shouldn't be problem with this if you are using a correct approach for CSS architecture. But like I said before, we can't predict what will be included in the final HTML of the landing page. There could be, for example, 100 elements, and this will be a little trouble for making everything on the CSS side. So the best solution for us is to use a generic approach for CSS architecture. It's mostly like from Bootstrap. You are probably familiar with Bootstrap or any other UI kit. So you can have different classes for different rules of CSS. Like, for example, you can set a button to be medium or large, and then put another class for making it, for example, with primary color or danger color. And what is important, you can mix those classes into one selector, and thanks to that, your CSS won't be exceeded. Because you have everything already written for every possible combination of elements. But situation is a little different because we have one feature which is an inline style editor, which allows for adding custom styling for widgets. And unfortunately, we can't control that. So the only solution is to make some validation of CSS size and inform users that he exceeded the limits. Okay, the last topic I want to say today is related with our A/B testing. We have quite custom solution for this. On this slide, you can see that we have page variations. Every page variation has a full page body. It can be fully different from other variations. So we don't have, you can't use AMP experiment for particular sections, but we need to use it for entire full page body content. So that's why it's a little trouble. We have also feature that serves the same variation for user who already seen this variation. So this is a very simple algorithm you can see on this slide. And the solution for this is to use AMP experiment for full page body of variation, and we can have different variations on the same document. It's of course produces the very heavy HTML, and the complication is also very difficult because we have this inline CSS editor. So we need to decide what to sacrifice mostly, because we can't have both features working on the same page. Okay, so I will give a voice to Oliver for a few another words, and thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you, Piotr. I think really just wanted to say a couple of words before we went off is you know, the theme that I've noticed sitting in the audience for a lot of the other conversations is, oh, AMP has limitations, AMP has limitations, AMP has limitations. Well, yes, those limitations exist, but one of the reasons that we're diving into the post-click experience, you know, first with AMP is because we really believe in AMP as a technology, and the AMP community is going to overcome those limitations. We're working really hard to find some of those solutions, and we're really excited to work with Google and everyone else in the community to overcome those. But in the time being, some of the things that we've learned is the balance between overcoming the technical limitations, but then also managing the product experience and the user experience to guide people around the limitations of AMP to maintain and preserve that user experience is really just like a hand-in-hand process between our product teams, our engineering teams, our design teams, to make sure that we can bake in the guardrails to have some kind of a pleasant UI or UX experience to be able to show, hey, this is not an AMP validated page, you need to make some changes, or hey, don't allow certain elements that are non-compliant, particularly for us in a builder space, is working in tandem to just really put in the protections for our users and our end customers so that they don't have a bad experience by doing something that AMP can't support. And we're really fully confident that as time goes on, we'll solve those problems and the community will solve those problems, and we'll be able to deliver a full functioning, robust post-click experience that's just as every bit powerful as, you know, as our current platform as AMP evolves as a technology. And with that, I think we're done, and thank you so much for listening to us.